In the quiet of the night, as your thoughts begin to soften, I invite you on a calm journey into one of the greatest civilizations ever to rise beneath the sun. Ancient Egypt, a land shaped by the Nile, guarded by vast deserts, and guided by traditions older than recorded time. Tonight, we begin a long, gentle story that moves from the earliest rulers of a newly united land all the way to Cleopatra, the final chapter of an age that lasted over 3 millennia. Before we begin, if you enjoy peaceful history journeys, feel free to like this video and subscribe for more relaxing storytelling. Now breathe slowly, let the world grow still, and allow the river of time to carry you back to Egypt's very first dawn. Imagine the Nile in its earliest days of settlement. Quiet waters drifting beneath a wide, star-filled sky. Long before pyramids rose or pharaohs claimed divine power, small villages lined the riverbanks. Families fished in narrow boats, tended simple fields, and watched the rhythm of the annual flood shape the land. These communities were separate and independent, yet slowly trade and shared customs began to weave them together. Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the north developed their own traditions, symbols, and leaders. Over many generations, influence shifted, alliances formed, and a sense of unity began to take shape. Among the southern leaders, one figure rose above the rest: Narmer. Whether warrior, diplomat, or both, he became the symbol of Egypt's unification. Picture him moving northward, not through one dramatic battle, but through patient, decisive steps. Ancient carvings show processions, standards, and scenes that hint at a growing authority. Eventually, Upper and Lower Egypt became one kingdom, and with that unity, the first dynasty began. Narmer, often considered the first pharaoh, embodied a new kind of leadership. A ruler seen as chosen by the gods to maintain balance and order. The early capital emerged near Memphis, a meeting point between north and south. From here, administrators organized the kingdom, scribes carved early hieroglyphics on ivory tags and stone vessels, and craftsmen created the first symbols of royal life. These marks were simple, but they were the seeds of a writing tradition that would flourish for thousands of years. Royal tombs also began to appear, long, rectangular mastabas built of mud brick. They were filled with pottery, food, tools, and small treasures meant to accompany the king into the afterlife. Even in this young era, Egyptians believed deeply in eternity. Their rituals, though simple compared to later ages, already revealed a culture centered on continuity and the sacred. Workers shaped stone jars, carved wooden panels, and prepared offerings in quiet, focused rhythm. Priests tended small shrines, farmers maintained canals, watched the floods, and supported the kingdom's growing needs. Life along the Nile grew more organized with each reign. The first dynasty gave way to the second, and Egypt continued to stabilize. Traditions solidified, leadership structures strengthened, and the idea of divine kingship took deeper root. And as generations passed, a new era slowly approached, one that would transform Egypt forever. Scholars later called this next age the Old Kingdom, the age of the pyramid builders, a time of confidence, creativity, and ambition, when kings would turn their gaze toward the horizon and imagine monuments meant to last forever. And so, with calm steps and steady breath, we move gently toward that rising age, letting the story unfold as peacefully as the Nile at dawn. The Old Kingdom began like a slow sunrise over the desert, soft, steady, and full of quiet promise. Egypt was united, its leaders secure, and the rhythm of life along the Nile had become deeply rooted. With growing stability came new ideas, new ambitions, and a gradual shift toward projects larger than anything the early dynasties attempted. In this rising age, the kings of Egypt began to build more lasting monuments. Mastabas evolved from simple mud brick structures into larger, more complex constructions made of stone. With stone came permanence, and with permanence came a new vision, the idea that a king's resting place could reflect not just his power in life, but his eternal role in guiding the land even after death. It was during this time that a brilliant official named Imhotep came into prominence. Serving King Djoser, he was more than an architect. He was a thinker, a priest, a visionary. Under his guidance, the first great leap in Egyptian architecture took shape. Instead of a single mastaba, Imhotep imagined a series of them stacked one above another, rising toward the sky in gentle steps. The step pyramid at Saqqara emerged from the desert as something entirely new, stone shaped into a giant stairway toward eternity. Imagine the quiet of the construction site in its early days. Hundreds of workers smoothing limestone blocks, shaping corners, and aligning walls under the warm light of the sun. There was no loud machinery, only the rhythmic tapping of stone tools and the soft shuffle of sand beneath their feet. Piece by piece, the structure grew, and with it, Egypt's belief in the power of its kings reached new heights. The step pyramid did more than change architecture. It changed the way Egyptians thought about kingship itself. A pharaoh was not simply a ruler during his lifetime. He was a divine being whose presence continued long after death. The pyramid complex around Djoser was filled with courtyards, chapels, and ritual spaces, all designed to support the king's eternal journey. As generations passed, the idea of building monuments grew. Later kings studied Djoser's complex and saw the potential to create something even greater. Stoneworking became more advanced. Labor forces became more skilled. The organization of the state became sharper, more efficient, more capable of handling massive projects. By the time the Fourth Dynasty began, Egypt had reached a steady confidence. The rulers of this era, Sfenru, Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure, would reshape the Egyptian landscape forever. Sfenru, the dynasty's first great builder, experimented with pyramid design. He attempted multiple constructions, learning with each one. The bent pyramid at Dahshur revealed challenges of angle and weight. The red pyramid, smoother and more stable, showed that the Egyptians were close to perfecting the shape that would become iconic. Picture Svenru's builders raising massive limestone blocks, dragging them along ramps, and guiding them with practiced strength. Thousands of hands, thousands of footsteps, all working in harmony, driven not by chaos, but by a shared cultural belief in legacy. Each block placed was a mark of devotion, a step toward immortality for their king. Svenru's accomplishments prepared the way for the most famous monument of all. His son, Khufu, would take the dream of pyramid building to its greatest height at Giza. As the foundations were laid, the desert winds moved softly across the plateau, unaware that a structure unlike anything the world had ever seen was beginning to rise. The Great Pyramid would become a symbol not only of Egypt's power, but of human ambition itself, a creation born from patience, precision, and the steady rhythm of skilled hands shaping stone under the endless sky. And as the sun rose and set over the plateau, the pyramid grew higher, its sides gleaming in the light, its shadow stretching across the sands like the presence of a king who wished to reach into eternity. Let us move closer now to that moment, letting the story unfold gently as the Great Pyramid slowly rises before us. As the Great Pyramid rose block by block, the entire Giza Plateau transformed into a world of steady rhythm and quiet determination. Workers arrived at dawn, their silhouettes outlined against the pale desert light. They carried stone, smoothed surfaces, and aligned edges with remarkable precision. There were no grand commands shouted across the sand, only organized teams working with practiced familiarity, each group knowing its place in the long chain of tasks. The pyramid's foundations stretched wide, anchoring it firmly to the earth. Above these broad layers, the structure climbed slowly, almost patiently, into the sky. Polished limestone casing blocks were fitted along the outer sides, catching the sunlight so that the monument gleamed like a beacon. In the distance, the Nile shimmered in soft blue, and beyond it, the fields spread in quiet green waves, a reminder that the life of the kingdom continued even as its most ambitious monument rose. Around the pyramid, a carefully planned complex began to take shape. There were temples for rituals, long causeways leading to valley structures near the river, and smaller tombs for nobles who wished to rest near the king in the afterlife. Giza became more than a construction site. It became a sacred landscape, a place where earthly labor and spiritual hope intertwined. Nearby, Khafre, Khufu's son, began preparations for his own monument. His pyramid rose slightly smaller than his father's, but it stood on higher ground, giving it a commanding presence. It was during his reign that the Great Sphinx was carved, its body shaping the natural limestone bedrock into a guardian figure watching over the plateau. The face, serene and unblinking, gazed eastward toward the rising sun, symbolizing protection, kingship, and the eternal cycle of day and night. Imagine the sculptors working carefully along the stone, brushing away sand, tapping chisels with gentle, controlled strokes. The desert wind carried the sound softly across the plain, blending with the rustle of palm leaves near the river. Slowly, the Sphinx emerged from the rock, its form both human and leonine, embodying strength balanced with calm authority. In the following years, Menkaure, the third major king at Giza, built a smaller yet beautifully crafted pyramid. Its lower casing stones were made of rich red granite, polished to a smooth sheen. Though not as massive as the earlier monuments, Menkaure's pyramid displayed refinement and elegance, reflecting a shift toward artistry and detail. By the time the Giza pyramids stood completed, the Old Kingdom had entered one of its most confident periods. The royal court grew more structured, administration expanded, and scribes kept careful records of offerings, labor, and land ownership. The belief in the divine nature of kings remained strong. Temples across the land performed rituals each day, honoring gods like Ra, the sun deity, and Osiris, lord of the afterlife. Life for ordinary Egyptians also held a steady rhythm. Farmers tended wheat and barley, fishermen cast nets into the Nile, and craftsmen shaped pottery, jewelry, and tools with practiced skill. Music, stories, and simple joys filled their evenings after long days of work. Though the pyramids belonged to the kings, the life of the civilization depended on countless hands and hearts carrying out daily tasks with quiet dedication. As generations passed, Egypt's prosperity continued, reaching its height during the later Old Kingdom. The government became more complex, responsibilities spread across officials, and Egypt's resources supported the creation of new temples and monuments. Yet with this growth also came pressures: long harvest cycles, the need for increased administration, and the challenge of maintaining such a vast system. Over time, the strength of the central government began to soften, and local governors, nomarchs, gained more influence. Their power grew as they managed resources, oversaw agriculture, and maintained their own local courts. Slowly, almost unnoticed at first, balance shifted. The unity that once flowed strongly through Egypt began to stretch thin. And as the Old Kingdom approached its final centuries, the Great Pyramids remained as silent witnesses to a world entering a period of change, one that would lead to new challenges, new rulers, and shifts in the rhythm of life along the Nile. Let us follow that path now, moving gently into the era that followed, as the Old Kingdom's light began to fade and Egypt stepped into a quieter, more uncertain time. As the Old Kingdom's brightness slowly dimmed, Egypt entered a quieter and more fragile period. The magnificent pyramids still stood untouched in the desert, but the unity that had made them possible began to weaken. Local governors, once loyal administrators, now held significant authority in their own regions. Their power grew as resources became strained, and the central court found it harder to manage the vast needs of the kingdom. Flood levels of the Nile became less predictable during these years. When the river rose too low, harvests suffered. When it rose too high, fields were damaged. These changes tested the entire system. Supplies dwindled, and communities faced hardships that challenged their faith in the leadership of the pharaohs. In many towns, people turned more toward their local governors, who controlled food storage and regional decisions, than towards the distant royal court. As this shift continued, the first intermediate period began. It was not an age of chaos, as it is sometimes described, but rather a time of scattered strength, many smaller centers of power instead of one dominant one. Some regions maintained peace and prosperity, while others faced struggles. The Nile still flowed, people still farmed and prayed, but the sense of national unity had loosened. Amid this complicated landscape, two cities grew especially influential: Heracleopolis in the north and Thebes in the south. Each claimed authority, each carried its own traditions, and each sought to restore harmony to the kingdom. Their leaders were not reckless warriors, but patient rulers trying to guide their people through uncertain times. In Thebes, a family of rulers rose with determination and a quiet confidence. They believed strongly in restoring Egypt, not through fear or destruction, but through steady organization and renewed faith in the old ideals. These Theban rulers strengthened their connections with the priesthood, expanded their influence along the Nile, and gradually built a foundation for reunification. The landscape of Egypt during this time felt different. Without the central government's large-scale projects, fewer grand monuments were built. Instead, local tombs and smaller temples reflected regional pride and varied artistic styles. Craftsmen experimented, scribes documented local histories, and communities found comfort in their own traditions. Though the kingdom was divided, creativity flowed in many directions. Eventually, a powerful Theban leader named Mentuhotep II emerged. With patience and strategy, he strengthened alliances and deepened his influence over the south. Instead of rushing into conflict, he moved carefully, respecting rituals and honoring the gods. Over time, he pushed northward, challenging Heracleopolitan rulers and slowly bringing more regions under his authority. When his efforts finally succeeded, Egypt was reunited once more. The country breathed again as a single kingdom, and Mentuhotep II became celebrated as the founder of a new era, the Middle Kingdom. This period would become known as a time of balance, artistic refinement, and thoughtful leadership. Under the early Middle Kingdom rulers, Egypt grew stable again. Irrigation systems were repaired, grain production increased, and long-distance trade routes flourished. Boats moved up and down the Nile carrying goods, gold from Nubia, incense from distant lands, fine pottery from nearby towns. Scribes recorded shipments in clean and organized hieroglyphs reflecting the new order returning to the land. Temples were restored and literature blossomed. Stories, wisdom texts, and poetry spread across Egypt, offering guidance and comfort. The belief in Maat, order, truth, and harmony, became central again, shaping both leadership and daily life. As generations passed, the Middle Kingdom matured into an age of quiet strength. Pharaohs traveled through their territories, listening to local concerns and ensuring that resources were fairly managed. Builders created elegant temples and tombs that felt more modest than the pyramids, but carried a refined beauty. Statues from this era often showed rulers with calm, thoughtful expressions, reflecting the values of the time. Yet even in this renewed unity, Egypt would eventually face new pressures, ones that would come from beyond its borders, carried by unfamiliar people moving slowly into the delta. Their presence would begin another turning of Egypt's long and winding story. But for now, let us remain in the Middle Kingdom's soft light, where stability has returned and the Nile once again flows through a land at peace.
As centuries passed in Egypt, the Middle Kingdom gave way to new rulers and new ambitions. Pharaohs sought to extend their reach farther than ever before, sending expeditions to distant lands along the Nile and beyond. Traders returned with gold, incense, and exotic goods, while scribes recorded every detail with quiet care. Each journey, each shipment, added a layer to Egypt's growing story, connecting distant regions into a single, gently humming network. Life along the Nile continued in steady rhythms. Farmers planted and harvested with patience. Fishermen guided their small boats along the river, and craftsmen shaped fine pottery, jewelry, and tools for daily use. Even in a world of kings and monumental projects, ordinary life maintained its quiet persistence, each day blending softly into the next. The river dictated their pace, and they moved in harmony with it, trusting its gentle cycles to sustain them. The pharaohs of this era also turned their attention to the desert frontiers, building fortresses and maintaining trade routes. Their goal was not only security, but the protection of knowledge, art, and culture. Temples were expanded, adorned with reliefs depicting rituals, offerings, and the faces of gods. In every carved stone there was a message of continuity, a reminder that even as generations changed, the values and beliefs of Egypt endured. It was during this time that literature flourished. Wisdom texts, moral stories, and reflections on life and death were copied by scribes in calm, methodical strokes. Tales of heroes and gods, of order and chaos, were recorded to guide future generations. These texts would echo for centuries, preserving the gentle philosophies and spiritual insights of a civilization deeply attuned to the cycles of nature and the quiet passage of time. And yet, as the Middle Kingdom reached its mature years, subtle changes began to appear. Local governors once again grew in influence, managing estates and resources with increasing autonomy. The balance of power shifted gradually, reminding all that even a river as steady as the Nile could alter its course over time. Still, Egypt endured, its people resilient, its culture deepening, and its monuments standing as silent witnesses to the rhythms of life and governance. In this calm, enduring world, the stage was being set for the next great chapter of Egypt's story, the New Kingdom. It would be a time of remarkable expansion, of pharaohs whose names would echo across millennia, and of a civilization at its fullest power. But before that era dawned, the lessons, wisdom, and artistry of the Middle Kingdom quietly strengthened the nation, preparing it to face new challenges and embrace the world beyond its familiar riverbanks.
The New Kingdom emerged like the first light of dawn, stretching across the Nile. Egypt, strengthened by the wisdom and organization of the Middle Kingdom, now looked outward. Pharaohs rose with bold ambition, expanding borders, establishing new trade routes, and reaching lands far beyond the familiar river valleys. Their reigns were marked by both power and ritual, each action carefully tied to the eternal order, or ma'at, that guided the land. Life in Egypt remained quiet yet purposeful. Farmers continued to tend the fertile fields. Scribes recorded daily accounts and sacred texts, and craftsmen refined their skills in pottery, jewelry, and sculpture. Yet now, alongside the calm rhythms of daily life, there was a growing sense of grandeur. Temples expanded, palaces grew more elaborate, and statues of kings projected authority with serene, watchful faces. The first of the great New Kingdom pharaohs, Ahmose I, began the process of reunifying Egypt fully, driving out foreign invaders who had settled in the delta. His victories restored peace, and with that stability, trade flourished once more. Caravans moved slowly through deserts, carrying gold, cedar, and exotic animals to the heart of the kingdom. Ships sailed along the Nile, transporting goods and ideas, each journey marked by patience and careful observation. With stability returning, the temples of gods like Amun, Ra, and Osiris became central to daily life. Priests maintained rituals that aligned human activity with cosmic cycles, and offerings were made with steady, deliberate care. Music, chanting, and incense filled sacred halls, creating a quiet rhythm that reminded all of the presence of the divine. Following Ahmose, pharaohs like Thutmose I and Hatshepsut strengthened Egypt's borders and encouraged peaceful trade. Hatshepsut, one of the few women to rule as pharaoh, brought innovation and artistry to new heights. Her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahari rose gently from the cliffs, blending harmoniously with the landscape, a testament to vision combined with patience and careful planning. During this period, art and architecture reflected a calm confidence. Wall reliefs depicted processions, offerings, and the lives of ordinary people with intricate detail, yet each scene moved gently across the stone, like a river flowing steadily. Tombs became more elaborate, emphasizing both the king's divine nature and the journey of the soul in the afterlife. As Egypt expanded into Nubia and beyond, the culture absorbed small influences from distant lands while preserving its core identity. Gold, ivory, and exotic animals arrived slowly but steadily, enriching both the economy and the imagination of the people. Egypt's strength lay not only in conquest, but in its ability to absorb knowledge, organize labor, and maintain harmony between its rulers, its people, and the natural world. And so, as the sun rises and sets over the Nile, the new kingdom unfolds, a land of quiet power, serene rituals, and monumental achievement. It is an era where ambition meets patience, and every stone, riverbank, and temple becomes part of a story stretching across centuries. After Hatshepsut's reign, the young pharaoh Thutmose III took the throne. Known later as a great military leader, his early years were guided by careful observation, strategy, and patience. Though his campaigns extended Egypt's influence into Syria and Nubia, daily life along the Nile remained steady and calm. Farmers tended their fields, fishermen guided their boats, and artisans worked quietly in workshops, shaping stone, wood, and gold for temples and tombs. Thutmose III's victories were not marked by chaos, but by meticulous planning and organization. Soldiers moved in disciplined formations, supplies were counted carefully, and every campaign reflected the harmony of Maat, the cosmic order that governed both human and divine life. His monuments and obelisks, carved with precision, rose slowly across the land, serving as reminders of a ruler's power balanced with careful thought. Following him, Amenhotep III brought Egypt to a period of extraordinary cultural refinement. Temples expanded with elegant columns and reliefs, depicting ceremonies, festivals, and offerings. life at court was filled with music, poetry, and gentle celebrations, reflecting a nation at peace and prosperity. Craftsmen perfected their techniques, producing statues and jewelry with subtle details, while scribes recorded events with steady, deliberate hands. Religion remained central. Pharaohs communicated with gods like Amun-Ra and Osiris through daily rituals and carefully orchestrated ceremonies. Priests tended sacred fires, offered incense, and chanted prayers that echoed softly through temple halls. Even ordinary citizens participated in festivals and observances, moving in rhythm with traditions that connected their lives to the eternal cycles of the cosmos. Yet, with Amenhotep III's long reign, subtle changes began to appear. His son, Akhenaten, would eventually challenge established traditions, introducing worship centered on the Aten, the sun disk. This shift moved slowly at first, gradually altering temple practices, art styles, and the focus of religious life. Statues became elongated, faces depicted with calm, introspective expressions, and temples reflected simplicity and light, contrasting with the grandeur of earlier constructions. Despite these changes, daily life for most Egyptians remained peaceful and steady. Farmers followed the same patterns along the Nile, craftsmen continued their quiet work, and rituals for the gods persisted. Even as the culture adapted to new ideas, the slow, continuous rhythm of life along the river endured, providing stability in a changing world. Later, Tutankhamun restored traditional worship, returning temples and rituals to their familiar order. His tomb, small yet meticulously arranged, reflected the careful attention paid to life after death and the enduring belief in continuity and harmony. Though he ruled for a brief time, the story of his reign reminds us that even in periods of change, the calm structures of Egyptian culture remained resilient. Through these generations, Egypt matured into a civilization of extraordinary endurance. Its monuments, temples, and tombs captured not only the power of pharaohs, but also the slow, steady pulse of a society that valued order, patience, and the careful interplay of human life with the eternal rhythms of nature. After Tutankhamun's restoration of traditional worship, Egypt entered a period of stability and grandeur that would be defined by one of its most famous rulers, Ramses II. Known later as Ramses the Great, he ruled for decades, guiding Egypt with steady determination and expanding its influence through careful diplomacy and military campaigns. His reign was not only about conquest, but about sustaining order, prosperity, and harmony throughout the land. Along the Nile, life moved in its familiar rhythms. Farmers tilled fertile soil along the riverbanks, fishermen guided their nets through calm waters, and artisans shaped stone, wood, and gold into precise works of beauty. The temples of Amun, Ra, and other gods flourished under his care. Priests performed rituals with methodical attention, offerings were placed with reverence, and incense filled sacred holes in quiet, continuous streams. Ramses II also focused on monumental architecture. The temples at Abu Simbel, carved into cliffs overlooking the Nile, rose gradually with colossal statues that embodied the serene strength of the pharaoh.
Each block of stone was placed carefully, each relief carved with precision, reflecting the patience and dedication of countless workers. These constructions symbolized continuity, stability, and the enduring relationship between rulers and the divine. Despite his military campaigns in regions like Syria, the emphasis remained on organized strategy rather than chaos. Armies moved in disciplined formations, supplies were carefully managed, and victories were celebrated with rituals that reinforced the values of Ma'at, harmony, and balance. Through these actions, Ramses II maintained both the security of Egypt and the gentle flow of life along the Nile. The daily life of ordinary Egyptians also reflected continuity. Children learned crafts and household skills, merchants carried goods along the river, and communities celebrated seasonal festivals with music, dance, and simple joy. Even as pharaohs built monumental temples and statues, the steady rhythm of daily existence continued, connecting generations through shared traditions and the ever-present guidance of the Nile. As Ramses II aged, he took care to ensure that his successors would inherit a kingdom still strong and organized. His inscriptions, reliefs, and monuments preserved not only his achievements, but also a calm, timeless vision of kingship, one that blended authority with careful attention to order, ritual, and the enduring cycles of life. In the centuries that followed, Egypt faced gradual transitions. Dynasties shifted. Foreign influence occasionally crept into the Nile Delta, and local rulers gained influence in parts of the country. Yet the civilization's core remained resilient. Temples continued to function, rituals were performed, and the steady rhythm of the river guided everyday life. Even as time moved forward, the story of ancient Egypt remained continuous. From the first pharaohs of the Old Kingdom to the powerful rulers of the New Kingdom, the land along the Nile was shaped by patience, ritual, and an enduring belief in order. Each generation contributed to a culture that valued balance, harmony, and the quiet persistence of human effort through centuries of history.
As the New Kingdom gradually approached its later years, Egypt began to experience subtle shifts in power. While pharaohs still ruled with authority, local officials and priests increasingly exercised influence in daily governance. The central court remained important, yet villages and regional centers gained more autonomy, quietly guiding the rhythms of life along the Nile. Trade continued along familiar routes, bringing gold, timber, and luxury goods from distant lands. Caravans moved slowly across deserts, while boats carried their precious cargo along the river. Craftsmen continued to create intricate jewelry, pottery, and statues, maintaining traditions that had been refined over centuries. Scribes copied texts and recorded events with steady hands, preserving stories and wisdom for future generations. Religion remained a guiding force. Temples were maintained with care, rituals performed in the same calm rhythm as always, and festivals continued to mark the seasons and honor the gods. Even as political power shifted subtly, the steady cycles of spiritual life offered stability and reassurance to the people. Gradually, signs of change became more pronounced. Some pharaohs faced challenges from rivals or foreign powers, while others ruled for shorter periods, leaving little time for grand construction or monumental projects. Yet Egypt's cultural foundations remained intact. Architecture, art, writing, and ritual continued to flourish, offering continuity amid the subtle uncertainties of politics. During this period, Egypt began to interact more intensively with neighboring civilizations. Diplomacy, alliances, and occasional conflicts became part of the slow unfolding story of the region. These connections introduced new ideas, technologies, and styles, which the Egyptians incorporated gently into their own culture, without disturbing the familiar rhythms of life. Despite these changes, ordinary life remained steady. Farmers tended their fields in harmony with the Nile's cycles, craftsmen pursued their work with care, and communities observed traditional festivals and ceremonies. The river continued to guide the land, and the people moved with it, maintaining a sense of order and calm amid gradual transitions in leadership. Through these generations, the story of ancient Egypt remained continuous. Even as dynasties rose and fell, and pharaohs came and went, the enduring values of balance, order, and harmony shaped both rulers and ordinary citizens. The monuments, temples, and tombs left behind by earlier kings continued to inspire, reminding each generation of the patient, steady work that had built a civilization along the Nile. And so, as the sun rises and sets over the timeless river, Egypt prepared quietly for the next chapter, a period of change, foreign influence, and gradual decentralization that would gently lead into the third intermediate period, without disturbing the slow, enduring pulse of the land itself.
As the new kingdom slowly gave way to the third intermediate period, Egypt entered a time of quieter transitions. The pharaohs still held authority, yet their power was more diffuse, shared increasingly with regional governors and influential priesthoods. The temples, especially those of Amun at Thebes, became central not only to religious life, but also to the organization of wealth and resources. This shift changed the rhythm of the kingdom, but life along the Nile continued with gentle steadiness. Villages and towns maintained their routines. Farmers rose with the sun to tend fields nourished by the river's predictable flooding. Fishermen guided their boats along familiar channels, collecting fish and guiding small cargoes to market. Craftsmen worked carefully in workshops, shaping pottery, jewelry, and small statues, preserving the artistic traditions passed down through generations. Scribes continued their meticulous copying of texts, ensuring that the wisdom and stories of the past remained alive. Although political power had begun to fragment, trade remained a quiet, constant presence. Goods moved slowly along the Nile and through desert routes. Gold from Nubia, cedar from Lebanon, and luxury items from more distant lands flowed into Egyptian markets, connecting the civilization to the broader world while maintaining its familiar rhythms. Diplomacy and cautious alliances helped protect borders and sustain prosperity, even amid subtle challenges. Priests held a significant role during this period, managing temples and the wealth that flowed through them. Rituals continued with careful,
measured steps. Offerings, chants, and incense followed schedules that had been maintained for centuries. Festivals still mark the seasons, celebrating the cycles of the Nile, the sun, and the land itself. Even as secular authority grew more localized, the spiritual heart of Egypt remained steady, giving stability to daily life. During these years, Egypt experienced occasional foreign influence. Libyans, Nubians, and other groups moved into border regions, sometimes peacefully, sometimes through subtle pressure. Yet the Egyptians absorbed these interactions slowly, incorporating new practices into familiar frameworks while maintaining continuity in governance, religion, and culture. Life for ordinary Egyptians continued with the same calm rhythm as centuries before. Children learned crafts and household skills. Communities observed seasonal festivals and religious ceremonies, while the Nile continued to guide agriculture and transportation. Through all these subtle shifts, the civilization endured, strengthened by its traditions and the steady presence of the river. And so, as generations passed quietly, the third intermediate period unfolded, a time of adaptation, regional authority, and careful maintenance of old rituals. Egypt's story remained continuous, its people resilient, and its culture enduring. Though political power had grown more distributed, the rhythm of life along the Nile flowed on, linking past and future in a gentle, uninterrupted current.
As the third intermediate period continued, Egypt's culture and traditions remained remarkably resilient, even amid shifting political landscapes. Regional rulers and influential priesthoods exercised more authority, yet the rhythms of daily life persisted along the Nile. Farmers tended fields with quiet diligence, guided by the steady rise and fall of the river. Craftsmen shaped stone, wood, and precious metals with careful attention, maintaining artistic traditions that had lasted for millennia. Temples continued to serve as centers of both religion and administration. Priests managed wealth, lands, and rituals with methodical precision, ensuring that offerings and festivals proceeded according to long-established cycles. The chants, incense, and soft melodies of sacred ceremonies echoed across towns and villages, providing continuity and calm in an era of subtle political change. Trade and diplomacy remained important. Goods from Nubia, the Levant, and Mediterranean lands arrived gradually, enriching Egyptian markets and culture. Caravans and riverboats moved slowly yet steadily, ensuring that communities remained connected even as regional power shifted. Foreign influence, though present, was absorbed in measured ways, blending with traditional practices rather than replacing them. Even as power became more distributed, the pharaohs and local rulers continued to honor the cycles of Ma'at, order, balance, and harmony. Public works, though smaller than the grand monuments of earlier kingdoms, maintained irrigation, fortresses, and temples, keeping life along the Nile organized and predictable. The arts continued to flourish quietly, with statues, reliefs, and jewelry reflecting the same serene, deliberate style developed over centuries. Over time,
Egypt approached the late period, a new era marked by both foreign interaction and internal resilience. Dynasties shifted more frequently, and invasions or migrations sometimes reached the delta. Yet the core of Egyptian culture remained intact. Life along the Nile continued in calm rhythms, daily tasks carried out with patience, and traditions maintained through ritual, ceremony, and careful record-keeping. Through these centuries, ordinary Egyptians remained the steady heartbeat of the civilization. Families planted and harvested, children learned trades, and communities celebrated festivals with music, dance, and offerings. Even as rulers changed and borders shifted, the Nile continued to guide daily life, reminding all of the enduring patterns that connected generations. And so, as Egypt entered the late period, the civilization stood prepared, resilient, enduring, and quietly evolving. The foundations laid over millennia allowed the land to face new challenges, absorb foreign influence, and preserve its culture, all while maintaining the gentle, unbroken rhythm of life along the timeless river.
As Egypt moved deeper into the late period, the kingdom faced new challenges and opportunities. Foreign powers, including the Nubians, Assyrians, and Persians, gradually interacted with the Nile Valley. Some came as conquerors, others as allies, and still others as traders bringing distant goods and ideas. Yet the heart of Egyptian life remained remarkably steady. Farmers continued to plant and harvest along the river. Craftsmen carefully shaped stone, wood, and metals, and scribes maintained meticulous records of events, trade, and rituals. Temples continued to anchor society. Priests oversaw daily offerings, recited ancient chants, and maintained sacred spaces with steady hands. Festivals marked the passage of seasons and honored gods like Amun, Ra, and Osiris. Even as political power shifted, these rituals provided a constant, gentle rhythm that helped communities endure periods of change. Trade networks expanded during this era. Caravans slowly traversed deserts, bringing gold, ivory, cedar, and luxury goods, while ships navigated the Nile carrying grain and crafted items between towns. The influence of distant lands entered Egypt quietly, blending with existing traditions rather than displacing them. Art and architecture reflected both continuity and subtle innovation, combining old styles with new motifs. Local rulers and pharaohs continued to maintain the principle of Mont, the eternal balance. Fortresses were repaired, irrigation systems maintained, and resources managed carefully to ensure stability. Monumental construction was less frequent than in previous eras, yet smaller temples and statues reflected a calm precision, emphasizing spiritual and cultural continuity. During this time, Egypt gradually became more connected to the broader Mediterranean world. Greek traders and settlers arrived along the Nile Delta, moving slowly into communities and integrating over time. Their presence brought new ideas, art forms, and economic opportunities, yet Egyptians adapted these influences gently, blending them with long-standing traditions so that daily life along the river remained familiar and steady. Through all these changes, ordinary Egyptians maintained their peaceful routines. Families worked together in farming, fishing, and craft production. Children learned household and artisan skills, and communities celebrated seasonal festivals and religious ceremonies.
life along the Nile continued in the same rhythmic cycle that had guided generations for thousands of years. And so, as the late period unfolded, Egypt remained resilient. Its culture endured, its traditions persisted, and its people continued to live in harmony with the river. Even amid political shifts and foreign influence, the gentle, unbroken rhythm of Egyptian life carried steadily toward a new and remarkable chapter, the era of Alexander the Great, the Ptolemies, and ultimately Cleopatra.
With the arrival of Alexander the Great in 332 BCE, Egypt entered a new chapter, one that would gently blend Greek and Egyptian culture. Alexander was welcomed peacefully in many regions, and his presence marked the beginning of the Hellenistic influence along the Nile. Cities like Alexandria were slowly built along the Mediterranean coast, their harbors and streets a careful mix of Greek planning and Egyptian tradition. Life along the Nile continued its familiar rhythm. Farmers still worked the fertile banks, fishermen guided their small boats, and artisans created pottery, jewelry, and sculptures with quiet skill. Scribes recorded events, trade, and rituals, ensuring that centuries of knowledge and culture remained intact. Even amid foreign influence, the calm flow of daily life remained unchanged, guided by the steady river. After Alexander's death, his generals divided the lands he had conquered, and Ptolemy I took control of Egypt, establishing the Ptolemaic dynasty. Slowly, the Greek rulers integrated themselves into the traditional Egyptian systems, adopting the pharaonic customs while maintaining connections to the Mediterranean world. Temples were preserved, religious rituals continued, and festivals honoring the gods remained central to society. Trade flourished under Ptolemaic rule. Ships moved gently along the Nile, carrying grain, papyrus, and crafted goods, while caravans brought luxury items from across the Mediterranean. Alexandria became a center of learning, slowly attracting scholars, philosophers, and artists who shared knowledge and ideas. Libraries, observatories, and schools grew quietly, preserving wisdom for generations to come. Despite these changes, ordinary life along the Nile retained its calm continuity. Families planted crops in rhythm with the river, craftsmen shaped materials with patience and skill, and communities observed traditional festivals. The blending of Greek and Egyptian influences introduced new art styles and architectural details, but these changes were gradual, enhancing rather than disrupting the familiar world. As generations passed, the Ptolemies strengthened the kingdom while respecting its ancient roots. Temples and monuments continued to honor the gods, and pharaohs maintained the principle of Ma'at, order, balance, and harmony. Even as foreign connections and intrigue grew, the river remained a steady guide for everyday life, connecting past and future in a gentle, unbroken flow. And so centuries of Egyptian history converged in this unique era, leading toward the final chapter of an extraordinary civilization. The Ptolemaic period preserved the traditions of the Nile while embracing new influences, setting the stage for a ruler who would become one of the most famous figures in history, Cleopatra.
As Cleopatra VII rose to power, Egypt entered its final chapter as an independent kingdom. She inherited a land rich in history, culture, and the quiet rhythms of daily life along the Nile. The river still guided farmers, fishermen, and craftsmen, its predictable flow ensuring that traditions and routines endured even amid political complexity. Temples continued to operate with measured rituals, and festivals marked the cycles of the seasons and the sun, maintaining continuity with millennia of Egyptian belief. Cleopatra was a ruler both strategic and thoughtful. She worked carefully to maintain Egypt's independence while navigating relationships with powerful leaders beyond the Nile. Diplomacy, alliances, and measured decisions defined her reign, reflecting the long-standing Egyptian principle of Ma'at, balance, order, and harmony. Her leadership was deliberate, each choice made with attention to the future of her people and the stability of the kingdom. The city of Alexandria flourished under her guidance, slowly becoming a hub of learning, commerce, and culture. Scholars studied mathematics, astronomy, and medicine in quiet, focused halls. Libraries filled with texts from Egypt, Greece, and distant lands, preserving knowledge that had accumulated over thousands of years. Ships in the harbor moved steadily, carrying grain, papyrus, and luxury goods, connecting Egypt to the wider Mediterranean world. Daily life continued along the Nile in the familiar, gentle rhythm that had guided generations. Families planted and harvested crops, children learned crafts and household skills, and artisans shaped stone, wood, and precious metals with patient care. Music, storytelling, and quiet celebration of festivals filled the evenings, creating a sense of stability and continuity even in a time of political and diplomatic challenges. Cleopatra herself embraced both Egyptian and Greek traditions. She participated in temple rituals, honored the gods, and appeared in the role of a pharaoh to her people, while also engaging with the wider Mediterranean world. Her reign reflected a careful blending of old and new, of local customs and international influence, all balanced in a calm, measured approach to leadership. Even as the Roman Republic slowly expanded its influence, the daily life of Egyptians remained rooted in the rhythms of the Nile. Farmers continued their work, craftsmen honed their skills, and communities observed religious ceremonies. The river, the temples, and the enduring cultural traditions provided a steady, comforting presence through centuries of history. And so, Cleopatra's Egypt represents the final chapter of a civilization that had thrived for thousands of years. From the first pharaohs to the great pyramids, from the wisdom of the Middle Kingdom to the power of the New Kingdom, and through the blending of cultures in the Ptolemaic era, ancient Egypt endured through careful balance, patience, and continuity. The river's calm flow mirrored the enduring spirit of a people and a culture that lasted longer than almost any other in human history.
As Cleopatra's reign gradually came to an end, Egypt's long and remarkable story reached its final chapter. Though political power shifted and foreign influence grew, the civilization that had flourished along the Nile for thousands of years left a legacy of culture, art, knowledge, and belief that endured far beyond the reign of any single ruler. The river continued to flow, its waters a silent witness to countless generations who had lived, worked, and celebrated along its banks. The monuments, temples, and tombs of Egypt remained as enduring reminders of human patience and creativity. Each stone, each carving, each carefully constructed pyramid spoke of people who valued harmony, balance, and order, who sought to connect the present with eternity, and who shaped a civilization capable of remarkable continuity. From the earliest pharaohs of the Old Kingdom to the careful governance of the Ptolemies,
Each generation added its own quiet layer to a story that had unfolded over millennia. Daily life, too, remained the heart of Egypt's enduring rhythm. Farmers tilled the fertile lands, fishermen guided their boats, artisans shaped materials with careful skill, and families celebrated traditions that linked them to their ancestors. Even as dynasties rose and fell, even as foreign powers moved into the Nile Valley, the steady cycles of life, dictated by the river, the sun, and the seasons, continued to provide comfort, structure, and a sense of continuity. And so, the story of ancient Egypt comes to rest, not with abrupt endings or dramatic conclusions, but as a gentle, flowing current. The first pharaohs, the builders of pyramids, the rulers of the New Kingdom, the Ptolemies, and finally Cleopatra, all contributed to a civilization defined by patience, resilience, and harmony. Their legacy endures in art, architecture, writing, and in the very idea of human persistence across the ages. As you drift now, let the calm rhythms of the Nile guide your thoughts. Imagine the quiet flowing waters, the soft rustle of papyrus leaves, the distant chants in temple halls, and the gentle work of countless hands across generations. Breathe slowly and peacefully, letting the long, serene story of ancient Egypt carry you into rest, knowing that the legacy of this extraordinary civilization continues to whisper softly through time. Thank you for joining this tranquil journey. If you enjoyed this exploration through history, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more calming stories from the past.